Hi everyone, this is SEC 210. Today in this session, wanted to take our customers over how they can protect sensitive data leveraging two of AWS's security services, Amazon Macie and Amazon GuardDuty. My name is Himanshu Verma and I'm in the worldwide security specialist team for AWS Security Services. In this session, I wanted to provide a quick overview and introduce Amazon Macie as well as Amazon GuardDuty. We'll go over some of the key functionalities of these two services. And most importantly, I want customers to gain from this session is example scenarios of how these two services can be used to protect data in Amazon S3. I'll also provide some example use cases of how security teams can leverage these two services for some of the important use cases. And then some next steps on what customers can take as actions. With that, let's jump into Amazon Macie and Amazon GuardDuty's key capabilities. First, let's start with Amazon Macie. Amazon Macie is a fully managed data security and data privacy service that uses both machine learning as well as pattern matching to help customers discover and protect sensitive data at scale. Some of the key benefits the service offers is discovering sensitive data at scale and also helping customers understand what is accessible. For instance, what are the different policies around where the data is stored, whether it's public, whether it's shared, or unencrypted. These are some of the key capabilities that Macie can highlight. One of the first benefits that Macie provides when it's enabled by default is to gain visibility and evaluate the security posture. Customers can have one centralized view to view all of their bucket inventory and also the bucket policies. They can also start monitoring any changes to the bucket policies. Once customers have identified which buckets are publicly accessible and or unencrypted or are shared, they can then prioritize exactly where and how much data do they want to inspect using Macie's inspection jobs. These flexible jobs allow customer to define the scope and frequency of inspection, which is where Macie can then identify sensitive data. The identification of sensitive data happens by leveraging pattern matching and machine learning. Being a managed service, Macie provides a built-in set of managed data identifiers that can be used to match and enumerate any classification findings. These can be in the form of personal identifiable information, PII, or healthcare information, financial information, or credentials. Customers also have the flexibility to define their own identifiers, known as custom data identifiers, using regular expressions and giving them data type names or ignore words that can also be used to identify and enumerate the sensitive data. And additionally, Macie comes in with a full range of management APIs, as well as integration with CloudWatch events or EventBridge, from where customers can operationalize those findings and take remediation and response actions. Now let's take a look at GuardDuty. And what is Amazon GuardDuty? Amazon GuardDuty is a threat detection service that uses machine learning, anomaly detection, and integrated threat intelligence to identify and prioritize potential threats. Amazon GuardDuty can help customers identify any known malicious and highly suspicious activity, and in addition to that, helps customers protect AWS accounts, workloads, and data stored in Amazon S3. When we look at Amazon GuardDuty at a very high level, there are various different sources from where GuardDuty gathers ingestion of data sources. These data sources are primarily in the form of network sources, that is VPC flow logs and DNS flow logs, which is where we can identify, for example, what instances are talking to what IP addresses or what domains are being referenced. That is the network logs that are ingested into GuardDuty. Additionally, GuardDuty also uses CloudTrail events, which is a long audit of all API activities within the AWS infrastructure as one of its data sources. And one of the newly added data sources in GuardDuty is S3 data plane events. Who is accessing what data and what policies are being changed or configured in S3, these are all recorded in the data plane events. These are the primary data sources or telemetry that Amazon GuardDuty automatically collects. This is an important point because customers do not have to enable or have to incur any costs associated with enabling the telemetry or the logs that are needed to investigate any known threats or malicious activity. Once you enable GuardDuty, these are automatically enabled for each account. This log and telemetry is then evaluated against threat intelligence, where Amazon uses its own threat intelligence and also integrated threat intelligence from our security partners such as Proofpoint and CrowdStrike. Again, being a managed service, that is all maintained and managed in the backend within Amazon GuardDuty. Using that threat intelligence, we're able to identify any known malicious content or bad IP addresses that have already been reported and or any malicious domains that have been known for either Bitcoin mining and or command control type activity. In addition to known threats, GuardDuty is also able to maintain a state and highlight any abnormal activity based on unusual behavior or anomaly. Things like an unusual number of instances being launched, or unusual traffic patterns from unknown ports, or unusual volume of data that is being transferred. These are the things that GuardDuty can highlight in addition to the known malicious content. Both deviations from known threats as well as abnormal anomaly detection is reported as findings in GuardDuty. These findings are varied on severity levels and can be routed automatically into CloudWatch events from where customers can integrate them into either alerting or notification tools, or they can integrate into our partner security incident and event monitoring tools, or more advanced automation and remediation tools. The findings from GuardDuty are also automatically on an account level sent to AWS Security Hub, which is our centralized monitoring tool, from where customers can actually leverage that to perform centralized monitoring as well as security assessment across all of their AWS resources. And in cases where customer security team need to investigate the root cause of an issue and do some further triaging of the security incidents, they can leverage Amazon Detective, which is one of our other security services, to further drill down to the root cause of the issue. So those are some of the ways of how Amazon GuardDuty's findings can be operationalized with various different options. Now let's look into how customers can use both Amazon Macie as well as Amazon GuardDuty to help protect data in Amazon S3. First, customers can deploy both these services in a scalable and centralized fashion. Both Amazon GuardDuty as well as Macie come along with a centralized management feature that can allow the security teams of customers to have one centralized place to manage and administer both these services. Customers can use the built-in AWS organizations integration, which is also a recommended way to manage multiple accounts, and easily designate or delegate a centralized management account from where they can then onboard multiple member accounts easily. This setup also allows customers to easily enable the service using the one-click auto-enable option for all the accounts that are being onboarded. This makes not only the onboarding of these accounts easier, but also provides customer security teams one centralized place to go and reference all the findings from these tools. Both these services come with a 30-day free trial that allows customers to enable this on all the accounts and start visualizing the findings. With Macie, the policy findings and the inventory evaluation functionality is included within the 30-day free trial. And for GuardDuty, all new accounts include Amazon S3 protection by default. For any already existing active Amazon GuardDuty accounts, customers simply need to go in and opt in for S3 protection for GuardDuty. That is also fully integrated with AWS organizations, so hence makes it easy to enable that feature across all accounts as well. Once Macie is enabled, customers can then evaluate their bucket security posture across all their accounts. That is one of the primary features that Macie offers. Customers can not only gain visibility across all of their bucket inventory, for instance, gain instant visibility into the total number of buckets, how many objects are there in those buckets, what is the storage size of those objects, and answers those questions easily. But they can also monitor any policy changes that are being made to these buckets. Anytime changes are being made to either access control policies or a bucket is being made public, or there are changes to encryption policies or replication policies, Macie will alert the security teams in the form of policy findings that will be reported both in the console and automatically sent to CloudWatch events or EventBridge. This is a continuous feature, and as new accounts are added and or new buckets are being added into those accounts, Macie continuously automatically monitors these. This is also a standalone feature when Macie is enabled. The second main feature is where customers can run inspection jobs and start discovering sensitive data. This is initiated by the option of creating flexible jobs. Now that customers have visibility into where are their public buckets and where are their unencrypted data or shared buckets, they can prioritize and select one or many of these buckets from one or many of their accounts in a consolidated fashion and then execute Macie's inspection jobs. The job creation process includes selecting the desired source or the buckets and then defining the scope and frequency of that job. For instance, customers can decide to scan those buckets either on daily, weekly, or monthly frequency, and or define the scope of how much do they want to inspect within those buckets. Once the jobs are created, Macie's managed data identifiers will automatically identify sensitive data related to personal information such as first name, last name, address, national IDs, passports, etc., or identify any financial information such as bank account numbers, credit card numbers, tax IDs, or any medical or healthcare related information, and credentials and secrets as well. For instance, API pins or keys or secrets. These are things that are already built in as managed data identifiers, and Macie will do a deep inspection on the objects and highlight any matches in the form of classification findings. Additional flexibility is offered where customers can define custom data identifiers and include them as part of their scope of job as well, and then highlight those as part of the classification findings as well. Now with GuardDuty and GuardDuty for S3 protection, customers can proactively detect any threats in Amazon S3. These findings are reported in 3 different categories. Policy findings, which highlight any changes being made to S3 policies. For example, an IAM principle that is granting access to S3 buckets so that they can be accessed publicly. That is an example of a policy finding. Malicious access. So for example, there is an S3 API being invoked from an IP address which has been listed on a known threat list. That is something that will be reported as malicious access finding. And then finally, anomalous behavior. For instance, an IAM entity invoked an S3 API in a suspicious way. That means the volume of data being exfiltrated or being transferred is unusual activity or abnormal activity. So those are the three different categories of S3 findings that GuardDuty will automatically highlight once it starts monitoring post-enablement. This is again an automatic and continuous feature where as new buckets are added or new accounts are added, GuardDuty will continue to monitor these. Using these two services and the key benefits that I just highlighted, I want to go into some of the example use cases that customers can now leverage to operationalize and create an automated response and remediation policy within their organization for data in S3. Before we jump into these example use cases, I want to highlight a key assumption where using the built-in feature of tagging S3 buckets or even the objects in these S3 buckets, customers can use those tags to trigger specific functions and evaluate specific operations. So let's jump into some of these example scenarios. The first one that I want to highlight is using Amazon Macie to trigger alerts on bucket tags and policy findings. One of Macie's core feature is inventory evaluation. So anytime S3 bucket changes are made at the policy level, Macie will report policy findings. These policy findings through Amazon Event Bridge can be used to trigger or create rules that can trigger step function workflows. In that step function workflow, customers can review the tags on those buckets. So for instance, if that bucket was scanned using Macie, the tag on that bucket can be true for scanning. And if PII or sensitive data was not discovered, then the tag on that bucket will be false for PII. This tag evaluation means that changing of the policy, for example, making that bucket shared externally or public, is just a security alert that the team should be aware of, and hence no additional action is required since there is no sensitive data. Let's take this a step further into an example where customers can now actually take an automated action in the event there is sensitive data discovered. Again, when a bucket policy is being changed, for instance, it's been shared externally, there will be a policy finding in Macie's console as well as an event bridge that can then be used to, via a rule to trigger a step function. That step function will again review the bucket tags to determine if that bucket was scanned by Macie and also identify if there was sensitive data discovered. Based on the classification findings, the tag on that bucket has the value PII is equal to true. And that can then trigger an operation to revoke that share because the last thing the security teams want to do is to share a bucket externally which has sensitive data. And then it can also send a notification alert to the security teams. So this is an example of how a bucket is prevented from being shared externally and an automated response can be taken by using the tags on the bucket to ensure that the bucket has been scanned and secondly, whether or not it has sensitive data or not. The same example can also be used in a policy action where a bucket is being made public. Not just shared externally, but made public. Again, Macie will highlight a policy finding, which can then go to Event Bridge and using the rule trigger a step function workflow, which will include to review the bucket tags. If the bucket tag for scan is true and PII is true, then revoking the public bucket and then sending a notification alert to the security team. So again, this step function workflow prevents a bucket being made public, especially when it has sensitive data in it. Now let's go into a use case scenario where a bucket has not yet been scanned or has not been tagged. In this case, again, once the policy on the bucket is changed, for instance, it's been shared externally, the policy finding in Macie will trigger a rule, and that rule will include the AWS step function workflow. Using that step function workflow, customers can design where they can review the bucket tag again. Since the bucket tag in this case says scan is equal to false, that means this bucket has not been scanned with Macie yet. And since Macie's management interface is all available through APIs, a Lambda can be triggered to create a scan job on that bucket, which has just been made or has just been triggered to be shared externally. That scan job can be looped to review its status, retrieve its job ID. Each job or sensitive data discovery job in Macie has a unique Amazon resource name and a unique job ID, which can then be looped for status. And once the job is complete, the findings from that job can be reviewed in the form of classification findings. If the findings match the managed data identifiers, such as personal, financial, or credentials, or any custom identifiers that customers have defined, then there will be classification findings of type custom identifier. Any one of these will alert the security teams that there is potential PII or sensitive information. And then the buckets can be tagged accordingly, and applying the bucket tags of scan true and PII true. That will then initiate to revoke the share, because again, this bucket is now determined to have sensitive data, and then send a notification alert to the team of the operation that's been performed. So again, this is again an example of protecting sensitive data using some of the automated controls and scanning a bucket. Next, using Amazon GuardDuty, once it's enabled for S3 protection, is continuously monitoring any ongoing active threats and or abnormal activity. Customer security teams can leverage the findings from Amazon GuardDuty, and any such abnormal activity or known malicious threats will be reported in GuardDuty's console as well as in EventBridge. So using EventBridge, when a rule is defined, it can trigger a step function workflow that can then be used to review if the bucket has any tags. And if the bucket has been scanned using Macie, as in previous examples, the scan tag will be true, and then the PII tag will depend upon whether it has sensitive data. In this case, there is sensitive data, so the PII is true. Now, before the finding is routed or sent to the security teams, either to a SIM solution or an external tool that is where the security teams might be operationalizing these findings, customers can enrich those findings and add additional information so that the security teams are aware that there is a bucket that is exhibiting either known malicious threats and or abnormal activity for data access, and it includes sensitive data. So again, enriching the finding before it's routed can be used to alert the security teams and also help them take intelligent operations. A combination of both GuardDuty and Macie can also be used. In this example, I want to highlight a layered security approach to protect sensitive data by using both GuardDuty as well as Amazon Macie. Let's assume that there is a bucket that has not yet been tagged and the customers do not know whether or not it includes sensitive data. However, GuardDuty has detected an alert on the policy changes of that bucket. These alerts are then sent to EventBridge, and from where, using the rule, it triggers a step function. That step function reviews the tag on the bucket, and since the tag says scan is equal to false or there is no tag, now we can initiate and create a Macie scan job and retrieve the job ID and then loop to evaluate the job status. Once the job is complete, and based on whether or not sensitive data was discovered or Macie reported any classification findings as part of that job, accordingly, the appropriate tags can be placed. In this case, if there was no sensitive data reported, the tags will be scan is equal to true and PII is equal to false. And then the policy changes will not be that highly severe, and hence can simply be added to enrich the finding of GuardDuty and then route it to the security tools where the security teams are operationalizing or going to take those actions. So that is an example of how both these services can be used to not only monitor, but also protect sensitive data at scale. Some of the key use cases where security teams can leverage these two services. Number one is to maintain regulatory compliance. Using Macie's ability to scan sensitive data at scale and providing the security teams the ability to create jobs that can be scheduled on the frequency that matches their data governance policies or matches their data protection policies allows customers to ensure that their security teams can monitor the sensitive data at all times and can, more importantly, apply automation for data protection policies on that sensitive data. For example, using bucket tags and object tags is a simple example of how customers can know where their sensitive data is once it's either in a data lake or it's being used across multiple applications. And they can ensure that they can meet regulatory compliance, for example, requirements with compliances such as GDPR or California Care Protection Act or PCI compliance, etc., can be met and ensuring that customers' sensitive data is handled appropriately. The second use case is where customers can automate threat response and remediation. Using GuardDuty and S3 protection in GuardDuty, customers can automatically monitor any object-level API operations and or any data access operations, and GuardDuty will highlight any known malicious threats and or abnormal activity. This will give the security teams the ability to proactively detect these threats in the form of GuardDuty findings and take actions and respond to them immediately. One of the other areas where customers can leverage a use case is to identify, protect, and continuously monitor for risks. Both Amazon GuardDuty as well as Amazon Macie can send its findings to Security Hub. AWS Security Hub is a centralized monitoring tool that allows security teams to assess their security posture across all of their AWS infrastructure. Using these findings into AWS Security Hub, customers can easily operationalize them by integrating them into CloudWatch events so that they can take custom actions and define custom rules. Some of those could be the examples that I just highlighted. Those can not only be operationalized from individual services, but from Security Hub as a centralized place. Also, Security Hub normalizes the finding format that allows security teams to easily parse and write custom remediation and response actions. And using the partner integrations of Security Hub into external alerting and or response tools can further help customers to automate their security posture. So this is a use case of automating response and remediation using 3 security services. Hopefully this was helpful and you are able to get an overview of what is Amazon Macie and what is Amazon GuardDuty for S3 protection and using those together to protect data in S3. I want to leave you with some of the next steps that you can take. Number 1, Amazon Macie has been revamped and re-architected with some of the new capabilities. So if customers are still using the classic Macie version 1, then we highly recommend customers to transition over to the new Macie. Customers should enable Macie on all their accounts so that they can then leverage the default feature of inventory evaluation across all their accounts. And then they can create sensitive data inspection jobs as needed. Secondly, we recommend customers to enable GuardDuty on all accounts. On any new activations, you will have Amazon S3 protection included by default. However, on already activated Amazon GuardDuty accounts, we recommend customers to opt in to the S3 protection. That will ensure that you are getting S3 specific findings as part of your GuardDuty enablement as well. Both these services come with AWS organization integration, so that's the easiest way to enable these services across multiple accounts. Also, both the services come with a 30-day free trial, so we recommend customers to enable these services and leverage the 30-day trial for these features. The only caveat on the trial is that the Amazon sensitive data discovery is not part of the free trial. The inventory evaluation feature, however, is part of the free trial. Customers are charged for sensitive data discovery based on the volume of supported data that is being inspected. And finally, once the findings are reported both in Macie and GuardDuty, we want customers to take actions on those findings and operationalize an automated response and remediation for those findings. So those are some of the next steps that I highly recommend customers to take. Hopefully this session was helpful and you learned something new about Amazon Macie and GuardDuty and how you can protect data in S3 using the layered security from these two services. With that, I thank you for joining this session, and it would be really helpful if you can take the survey and provide your feedback on this session. Thank you.